My name is Betty, and I come from the All Women's Action Society. A little bit about myself. Before I joined the All Women's Action Society, I was actually in the corporate sector and doing human resource work. However, prior to that, I was actually a trade unionist. So that is where my first exposure to sexual harassment came about because at the workplace in Malaysia, you do find that there are quite a lot of harassment going on, but people dare not report cases as they do not trust the mechanism that's available. And subsequently, in 1985, five women's groups and sections of main national organizations got together and formed what is known as the Joint Action Group Against Violence Against Women. And we held a 2 day workshop where we discussed some of the issues related to violence against women, like rape, domestic violence, and of course, sexual harassment. And society, and we were established after the 1985 workshop and registered in 1999. We work to improve the status of women and their lives. And in our vision, we hope to have an equitable society where there will be no violence against women or no discrimination. So we declare ourselves as a feminist organization where we will definitely work for all people, all persons, but in particular women. Now, how we have worked as part of the Joint Action Group from 1985 to now is that whenever there are advocacy work to be done, we work as a Joint Action Group, and that is why when after the 2 days workshop, the first thing that we tackled was on the issue of rape, where we worked with a group of people known as Citizens Against Rape and got many laws that are related to rape changed. The Joint Action Group then worked on domestic violence, which we successfully lobbied for and got it passed in 1994 and only implemented in 1996. So then, after these two big issues of domestic violence and rape has been dealt with, the journey for sexual harassment laws began in Malaysia. The JAC group then focused on how do we get sexual harassment to the public. The issue has always been dealt with by the trade unions, and at that point of time, the trade union was also part of Joint Action Group. But when the women's section of trade union moved away from, left the Joint Action Group, the focus on sexual harassment then was taken up by AWAM. And that is when we started to get more involved. Uh, from the history of this journey working on legislation for sexual harassment, we have from the start worked on training and thus creating awareness among people. It has resulted in us having a survey which was conducted by Dr. Cecilia Ng. She worked with companies and because in 1999 there was a code on prevention and elimination of sexual harassment at the workplace. So she used this survey to monitor how successful has this code been in terms of getting companies to come up with policies. Sad to say it was only like 0.01%, and therefore more training needs to create awareness, and that is how her organization, she belongs to both training for companies. And this was followed by the working on a standalone sexual harassment bill. Because in Malaysia, although sexual harassment is known to people, people are aware that it is a conduct of sexual nature that is unwelcome, but they do not know, is there any laws that can help them find redress, help them find justice if they are faced with harassment, especially at workplace. And in our country up till now, or up to 2012, there was only various laws in the penal code which constitute, for example, sexual assault. So if somebody touches you or hugs you from the back, you may make a police report and call it sexual assault. Or if somebody is to make some gesture or speak some sexual jokes, you can file under the penal code, section 509. But in each of these section of the penal code, it has very high burden of proof, and you need to have evidence to support that you are sexually abused. We have followed clients who receive phone calls harassing them, and the police at the police station would say that, oh, so you receive calls from people, but isn't that your handphone? Maybe they are your friends. So the police also make it trivial. They laugh it off, and they make fun of the survivors of sexual harassment. So this kept on, and therefore we really felt that it's high time that we get together a standalone bill that will allow people who face or experience sexual harassment, whether at workplace or any area, the public space, to be able to take up this issue and make a report. And we wanted to use what is known as balance of probability for industrial cases. Normally, the proof is used on balance of probability, whereby if you have a tribunal that says that if it is most likely that the person that is alleged to have committed sexual harassment is possible that he has done it or she has done it, then the tribunal can find some form of compensation or redress for the survivor of the sexual harassment. So we were very fortunate to have lawyers within our joint action group, and one of the lawyers, Zarizana, she started to draft a bill on sexual harassment, and with another colleague, we used to travel up to Penang, one of the states in the northern part of Malaya, to provide input and discuss the law. And along the journey, we will be reading this bill, and that's my first experience of learning the word vicarious liability. So, although I'm not a lawyer, I was very familiar with this bill at the end of every trip. And in 2001, we presented this uh, bill, sexual harassment bill, to the Ministry of Women. Unfortunately, this new ministry that was formed after we ratified CEDAW in 1995, they felt that this bill should fall under the Ministry of Labor, Human Resources. So it was passed over to the Ministry of Human Resources, and it was sitting there until when another minister from the Human Resources comes in, said that no, it's involving women. So it went back to the Ministry of Women. And so forth, it went back and forth. And in 2002, the Women Center for Change in Penang organized another roundtable meeting and we invited experts from and again we started submitting to the various ministry our this sexual harassment bill. So from then on the part of advocacy for legislation, it has been going back and forth with the ministries of women, human resource, but not until in 2011, the government was looking at some transformation programs to leverage on women to come out to work in the labor force. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to be in one of these labs. So we pushed for a standalone sexual harassment bill, and we put it as a timeline that by 2013 there should be a law that is in standalone and for sexual harassment to be eradicated. Although we didn't get this standalone law, what we had was an amendment into our Employment Act. So in a way, it improved over the years because in 1999, several NGOs, the trade unions, the employers federation, all got together with the Ministry of Human Resource and they came up with a code to prevent and eliminate sexual harassment at workplace. It was actually quite a good code, except that it did not have enforcement power. Now, with the amendment in the Employment Act, it should give a form of enforcement, especially if sexual harassment happens at the workplace. And when the uh, amendment was done in the Employment Act, Awam got a lot of invitation to do training, especially in the corporate sector. So in the past, if we were just doing training to create awareness, we now have a tool, and that is not only are we talking about sexual harassment, we are talking that as companies, they must provide policies, they must redress any issues or complaint raised on sexual harassment. And the cases that we see when we visited the or when we did training in terms of with company is that both the employees and the employers, they are both very careful with one another. Uh, the employees cases of what you call alleged sexual harassment or accuse the management of sexual harassment. So it was very interesting, and as we did our training, we actually have managed to change the perception of the employers and also improve the self-esteem and confidence of employees to speak out on sexual harassment. And nowadays, what we do is we also tie in sexual harassment with the issue of the rights of women especially, because many a times from cases that was shared with us, we find that women are not aware that it is their right to have a safe. And as we do case studies with these employees, we tabulate the case studies, and it becomes very clear to them that whoever who experienced sexual harassment leave the workplace, and that actually violates your right to work. The perpetrator, most of the time, is still the stereotyping of man has the privilege, man has the power, and therefore, even though he may not be your boss, he will find a way to harass the women. And it was so interesting that yesterday I did a session with some college students, and there was a guy who actually he dare not tell the lecturer off, and he could feel the power play between the lecturer and him. And he says that he doesn't know what to do to help his fellow classmates. So we asked him, is it more important to, because he felt that if he is to report on the lecturer, he's actually taking the right of this person's job, the lecturer's job from him. And when we raised the question with him, what about the job of all your other classmates? Will they ever reach the point of reaching the job market? Because if they are to quit their schooling now or their classes now, they won't graduate. They will have no chance of a good employment. So who takes care of that impact on the students? Why do you just look at the impact on the teacher or the lecturer? And it was so interesting. He suddenly like, yeah, why didn't I think about that? And from the student community, from our training with university, we also found that again the power play is very strong. There was a case where in our country, if you have a study loan from the government, the policy for the women, the person who loan the fund cannot be pregnant, married and be pregnant. And so one of the students who has a loan was to have a relationship with him. Thankfully, the girl's husband was very understanding, and they were willing to even lose the scholarship if necessary, but they couldn't take this harassment from the lecturer, and they reported on him. So good for the students. And there was this young student who actually was so traumatized that when as she spoke to me, she was actually breaking out into tears because she was harassed by her own fellow countrymen. They are from a different country who have came to Malaysia to study, and she just could not stand up to their own cultural force that the men were reinforcing on her and harassing her, kept harassing her. So this is the situation in our country. Uh, Many a times it is women who are being harassed, but there are cases where the men get harassed, and people are now linking that it is the more effeminate men, the more soft men that gets harassed, and we link it back to the same gender stereotyping. If you are acting like a feminine, uh, you should be harassed like any other women. So we need to do a lot of training to change mindset, and we just need to keep on working to progress with the ministry in as far as laws are concerned. We have made some inroad since 2012 when the Employment Act has harassment act. I mentioned about the trainings that we do for corporates, and basically the apart from that in Awam, which is our strength is in lobbying for laws and doing training, we have taken on campaigns to make it more known to the general public again on sexual harassment, and this is done in 2011 with a coalition of civil society and women's group called the Shout campaign. Shout is the acronym for Sexual Harassment Out. So it's SHOUT. And in this campaign, what we did is that we started off by doing training our various partners to do training in sexual harassment, and then we allow them to go out and do further training with whichever group that they are working on. So we have got grassroots people, they do training with the grassroots. And because Awam have contact with the corporate sector, we bring in our training to the corporate sector. And during the training, how we want to make people realize is we carry out activities using exercise. We get them to line up, give each person in front of them a shoulder rub or a massage, and then we reverse the process and we ask them how they feel. We have observed people there cringing, feeling shy, but they never speak up. And we use such an exercise to say that that's exactly how sexual harassment is. You don't welcome the action, but you do not speak out. So it is like an aha moment for them, and they realize that, yeah, that's exactly what happens when they face with sexual harassment. So in such a training, we also incorporate it by asking them, do they recognize what is sexual harassment or what is discrimination? And we make connection. Sometimes discrimination ends up as sexual harassment, and then we ask them to discuss and explain as a group how they feel about the cuts. And then when they discuss on their own, their minds start to change. They start to argue among themselves. They know that if that was your daughter, your wife, or your mother, how would you feel? Oh, as well as senior managers who, on the first day of training, so what Awam intends to do is, since our, which will be going to four states, bringing on reaches out to more people, and we hope that we can strengthen the argument for a sport with my session. And it's back to you, Ruby. I would right. You don't. You need to claim this right if you feel that you have been harassed. But to the men, you need to then not remain silent and support the women that are facing the violence. So I think it's high time that men also play a part in combating sexual harassment. If you are a sexual harasser, stop it. And if you know of someone